Paul is running through a back alley. The sky is filled with smoke, and sirens can be heard far away. Outside the city, everything appears ruined and abandoned, indicating the possible end of civilization as we know it. In a lonely place, Paul finds two crying babies. He picks them up, and they cry even louder. But he comforts them and decides to be their dad, giving them a home in the middle of all the mess and confusion around them.
One eternity later.
Paul waits impatiently for Tom in the field, growing increasingly frustrated as Tom is late. When Tom finally arrives and apologizes, they head back to the house together. Inside, they secure every entry point, and Paul asks his sons if they're sure they're safe. They assure him they are. As they sit down for dinner, Paul sternly warns Tom that if he's late again, he won't be allowed beyond the boundaries. Tom attempts to explain, but Paul interrupts with another warning. Tensions rise when Joseph throws something at Tom's face, sparking a fight between them until Paul intervenes to stop them. After dinner, Paul looks outside, worried that something might attack at any time. Meanwhile, Tom and Joseph engage in a game of chess. Suddenly, Paul's attention is drawn to the dog scratching at the floor. When Tom goes downstairs to investigate, something strikes the door forcefully, attempting to break it down. Paul rushes to join Tom, and together they brace the door against the assault until the pounding ceases. Tom returns upstairs and mocks Joseph for not assisting. Joseph fires back, questioning if Tom noticed anything during the door's attack. Tom admits he didn't. Joseph then explains that there were 3 distinct attempts, a 10-second test, a 20-second attempt to break the door, and a final 1-minute effort out of frustration. The following morning, they inspect the doors and collect wood for repairs. While Joseph is in the garage, Paul enters and inquires about his project. Initially hesitant, Joseph eventually opens up, admitting he's been struggling to start the truck. He explains that once it's up and running, it will be a significant asset. Paul takes charge, swapping the relays to kickstart the truck. Delighted with the success, he invites Tom and Joseph for a drive, enjoying a brief outing together. After coming back from the drive, Paul instructs Tom to accompany Joseph to the river to salvage somethings for the window. Along the way, Tom remarks to Joseph that if he hadn't crashed that thing, he wouldn't be stuck with him. Joseph fires back, asserting his ability to manage on his own. Afterward, Tom gets out of the car and instructs Joseph to meet him there before sunset, then he runs off to the Rose farm. When Tom arrives at the Rose farm, a security guard greets him at the entrance. As he enters the town, an old woman and a man express their joy at seeing him. Tom explains that he needs to complete the work he started yesterday. While getting some water, a girl informs him that the pumping well is broken, startling him. After recovering from the surprise, Tom mentions that he still has to finish the lambing stall from yesterday. The girl reassures him that it's already fixed, her dad took care of it. She then tells Tom that her dad needs his help with something else. Surprisingly, she leads him to the field, and they engage in a conversation about the apocalypse. Before Tom leaves to go back home, they share a hug. Paul sits by the waterfall, puffing on a cigarette, his gaze fixed on something in the distance. Meanwhile, Joseph arrives at the riverside and enters the factory in hopes of salvaging something useful. However, upon opening the door, he is ambushed by a swarm of cockroaches, forcing him to hastily retreat. In another part of the forest, Tom is running through the woods when he slips and falls into a big hole. Later, Joseph can't find Tom when he returns to the same spot, so he goes home without him. Upon reaching home, he tells Paul everything, and Paul gets ready to find Tom. Paul instructs Joseph to lock up the house and wait inside until he comes back. Then Paul heads out to search for Tom. When Tom wakes up in the pit, he uses a lighter to see, but he can't find a way out and starts to feel hopeless. Suddenly, he spots a creature growling at him. In the woods, Paul hears the noise and heads toward it. Tom grabs his knife and stabs the creature's hand as it approaches him. But as he backs away, something grabs his face. Fortunately, Paul arrives just in time and kills the creature with the knife. He calls out to Tom, who confirms he's in the pit. Paul tells him to wait while he finds the entrance. After getting into the pit, Paul checks Tom for injuries and then instructs him to close the entrance to prevent anything else from getting in. Back at home, Joseph is asleep when something reaches through the door, trying to grab him. It fails to get hold of Joseph with its nails but eventually enters the room, where Joseph traps it in a cage he had set up. In the forest, Paul hears movement outside. He instructs Tom to grab a rock so they can check what's out there. Peeking through the entrance, they spot something moving. Suddenly, the ground begins to shake, and Paul realizes something is digging underground. He tells Tom to brace against the wall while he places dynamite in the hole and sets it off. The next morning, Joseph ventures out of the house to search for Paul and Tom. Meanwhile, Tom is diligently digging Paul out from the ground to the surface. As Joseph makes his way, he comes across Tom, who is struggling to carry Paul, who appears to be unconscious. Joseph rushes to assist Tom, and together they bring Paul back home. They carefully lay Paul on the bed, hoping he will recover soon. In Joseph's room, Paul hears something. When he is about to pick up the curtain, Joseph stops him from lifting it. When Paul asks him what it is, Joseph reveals that he caught one last night using himself as bait. Tom thinks he's crazy, so he picks up the curtain and finds that Joseph is telling the truth. Joseph then informs Tom that it took them only 8 minutes to break into the house, the shortest time yet, and there were only 2 of them. He speculates that they might be getting smarter. Tom informs Joseph that he took care of a group of the creatures last night.
Oh, okay.
Joseph is surprised and asks if it wasn't their dad who did it. Tom confirms and offers to let him kill the one in the cage if he wants to. Tom gets ready to deal with the creature. When they open the cage, the creature runs under the bed to shield itself from the light because it hurts them. Rocco, their dog, jumps in and attacks the creature. In the chaos, the creature retaliates, targeting Tom. Joseph swiftly intervenes, pressing the creature down with his foot and restraining it with a broom while Tom grabs an axe and swiftly cuts off its head. Later, Tom suggests taking Paul to the Rose farm so they can help him and give him some medicine. Joseph, again proving himself the smartest person again, tells Tom that they're not going to help us. Despite Joseph's warning, Tom insists and takes Paul to the Rose farm. There, they encounter Miss Rose and the others, who tell them that they can't do anything for their dad. When Joseph heads back, Tom asks him where he's going. Joseph tells Tom he can stay and then confronts him for not taking responsibility, always doing what he wants without caring about the consequences. Tom denies this, but Joseph insists, accusing Tom of being selfish and not contributing to their survival efforts like him and their dad. Tom, angered by Joseph's words, puts him on the ground and starts choking him until Charlotte intervenes and stops him. Joseph leaves for home with Paul, and Tom stays behind. Charlotte invites Tom into the house and gives him some food. In a moment of intimacy, they kiss each other, but their moment is interrupted when their dad catches them, looking at Tom angrily. Downstairs, Tom asks Charlotte for medicine, and she hesitantly gives him some. On his way back home, Tom is stopped by a person holding a gun, accusing him of stealing. Tom denies it, but the person insists he come with him. When Joseph gets home, he notices something unusual and brings his dad inside. He then goes to the garage where he finds footprints of the creatures. He searches around to see if they had dug something in the ground but finds nothing. At night, Joseph begins closing all the entrances when suddenly he falls into a hole dug by the creatures. Meanwhile, at the Rose farm, some people tie up Tom and prepare to punish him for stealing and lying. As they hold his leg and one person with a gun gets ready to shoot him, Tom calls out to Charlotte, but no one comes. Instead, the creatures emerge and pull the guy holding the gun underground. Mr. Rose hears something unusual and gets up from bed to check, only to be attacked by a creature that slashes him with its claws. The creature then attacks his wife, and despite Mr. Rose's efforts to protect her, he is unable to do so. Miss Rose runs to see Charlotte but is captured by the creature on the stairs, which kills her by clamping its mouth around her and sucking her into its stomach. Charlotte gets up and goes to check what's happening. She screams when she sees the creature in the bathtub with its butt hanging out. Meanwhile, back at the barn house, all the people are attacked by the creatures one by one. Tom manages to free himself, and when a creature is about to attack him, Charlotte shoots the creature down. Tom then runs toward home and brings Charlotte with him. Joseph opens the door for Tom and Charlotte, explaining what happened at the Rose farm. Tom gives Joseph the medicine for Paul and apologizes for his recklessness. When Paul wakes up, they inform him about the hole in the ground, and he urges them to prepare for a fight. Joseph devises a plan. They gather supplies from the garage and set up traps in the house for the creatures. When the creatures enter the house, Tom attacks one with a knife, killing it. Charlotte kills the other creature with the gun as it claps its mouth. They all move upstairs, and Paul emerges from the room. He takes the gun from Charlotte and creates some holes in the floor. A bunch of creatures break in and attack Paul, who fights them off with a bat. When they all attack him at once, they fall into the ground. One creature makes it into the room, and Paul tries to fight it. Tom and the others join the fight and kill the creature by strangling it. After killing the creature, they run to save themselves from the explosion. Paul closes the door to protect his children and give them some time to cover themselves. Joseph begs Paul to open the door, but Tom insists that they have to leave. They all rush inside a refrigerator, and the entire house explodes. Miraculously, they all survive the explosion. Emerging from the refrigerator, they start searching for their dad, but the creatures emerge from the ground, forcing them to flee. They all pile into a car, but the creatures stack on top of each other to form a wheel and chase them. Charlotte shoots at them to no avail. In a desperate move, she throws the gun, causing the creatures to crash to the ground and die. The next day, they bury their parents, sharing heartfelt words at their graves. After the funeral, they began seeking allies to fight the creatures, closing the chapter on their difficult journey. If you enjoy this wild tale of nighttime antics, give it a thumbs up, hit that share button to spread the horror, drop a comment with your favorite part, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more adventures straight out of the imagination.